All things are full of gods. Thales of Miletus, pre-Socratic philosopher, father of Western philosophy. Good morning, everybody. It's your favorite aspiring revolutionary here, a wandering author, reminding you that we're all the authors of our own lives. As always, my message remains the same: spend less, live more, earn your freedom with frugality. And today, we're going to do a quick review of Greek culture, including their myths, gods, Zeus, Ares, all that really popular and impactful stuff that they had. It was actually the one thing that unified the Greeks, not instead of like a political polity. But just real quick, that right there is tumbling waterfalls. It to me, honestly, it looks like it's hardly a trickle. My foot still hurts a little bit, but I have walked about 5 miles today, so I'm not going to walk around too much in this video. I don't want to exacerbate the issue. But Greek religion and culture, like I said, was the unifying element that connected all the Greeks together. And that quote at the start of the video kind of showcases what the earliest Greeks really thought about things, and they really did they saw the world much differently than we do. They genuinely believed that the world was full of gods. Literally everything was. That's why they had it. They was a polytheistic. They have a whole pantheon. Many of archaic Greece's motifs, themes, and allegories form Western media's bedrock, influencing nearly every aspect of modern culture. Even when considering how we speak about the ancient Greeks, it is their culture that unifies them, not politics. If we talk about an ancient Greek, we literally are speaking about someone who spoke the Greek language. From the Olympics to a pantheon of gods, shared cultural elements helped the Greeks identify themselves compared to the rest of the world. So, today we live in the United States, or I do, and in general most people live in a country, and that's how they kind of unify or identify who's like. A Greek didn't belong to a Greek state. There was Athens and Sparta were separate, so was Thebes and Corinth. They belonged to the same culture. They spoke the same language. Now, religion for the Greeks was much more prominent than it is for most of us, at least in the West nowadays. So we obviously, especially if you've ever played the God of War series on PlayStation, we've all heard of Zeus and Ares, or even if you've seen Hercules, the Disney movie. And if you're a fan of God of War, you are probably familiar with other members of the Greek pantheon. However, there was no sacred text or an orthodox set of beliefs that all Greeks followed. There wasn't a single book like the Bible or the sutras. As a result, natural variations occurred across regions, creating unique regional flavors of the Greek faith. For the archaic Greeks, evidence of divinity was found everywhere. And Thales of Miletus once said, all things are full of gods. It's hard for us, these people genuinely believed in magic, and they used it. Like, if a politician wanted to declare war, they went to the Oracle of Delphi before they declared war to get the, permission of the gods, and they believed the whole thing. As a polytheistic faith, Greek religion features numerous deities, although not all of them were worshipped in each state. Athens alone hosted hundreds of cults, too many for any one person to partake in them all fully. But it's almost like a choose-your-own belief type of system back then, right? By the end of the Archaic Age, the Greek pantheon, the mainstream Greek pantheon, included 12 deities, sometimes imagined to live atop of Mount Olympus. Many of these are in popular Western media, so we'll go over them real quick. Zeus was the Allfather and controlled the sky and weather. He's normally the one with the white beard, throws the lightning bolts. He and his brothers, Poseidon and Hades, divided the world into 3 parts. Zeus got the sky, Poseidon got the land and the seas. Now this is something I didn't actually know. I thought that he was only the sea. So not only is he in control of the oceans, but he also is in control of things like earthquakes. And then Hades got the underworld, of course. Hera was Zeus's wife and goddess of marriage and childbirth, but Artemis, the virgin, was also associated with childbirth, and she was the goddess of hunting in the wilderness. Athena was born from Zeus's head and lorded over crafts and warfare, and often served as the protectress of cities. She was like the patron saint of Athens too, funny enough. And she was also the goddess of calculated warfare in comparison with the frenzied fighting associated with Ares, which is like the main protagonist from God of War, the first one. You go and you literally hunt him down as Kratos. If you've never killed a Greek god, that's a great game to simulate it, at least. Ares' lover Aphrodite was the goddess of beauty and sexual passion. Aphrodite. That's where we get the word aphrodisiac from, too. However, Aphrodite was actually married to Hephaestus, a lame dwarf god who controls metallurgy and volcanoes. And then Apollo, if you've ever heard of Apollo, he was the god of prophecy, healing, music, and culture. Again, if you've watched the movie Hercules, the little guy with the sandal that has the wings on him, that's Hermes, the messenger god who's in charge of communication, thievery, and magic. And then Demeter was goddess of cereal crops and human and animal fertility. And then finally, Hestia is usually part of the canonical 12 Greek gods, and she's in charge of hearth and home. Now, there is a whole suite of minor Pantheon gods, but like I said, back then they didn't have the internet, so they couldn't all communicate with each other rapidly. Although they did communicate quite a bit, considering how primitive they were. And so there were a whole host of Pantheon, or other minor deities. And also, having so many gods made it easy for the Greeks to comprehend other polytheistic systems. And they simply correlated those people's gods with theirs, such as equating the Egyptian Isis with their god Demeter. And there were other deities worshipped throughout the Hellenic world. So one of them that's pretty popular today, actually, is Dionysus, who's the god of misrule, altered states of consciousness, in particular with wine, dance, and drama. And then, of course, there's Heracles, son of Zeus, Asclepius, Hecate, the Muses, Kore, Persephone, the nymphs, Pan. There's also personifications of fortune, fear, democracy, health, and peace. Like I said, like they all said, gods are in everything. They truly lived in a spiritual world in their mind. And in addition to major and minor deities or gods, Greek religion also featured diverse daemons, good or bad spirits, and heroes, which some of the heroes they worshipped were based on real people that accomplished particularly noteworthy things in some way, like founding a city or leading a successful battle. The Romans would kind of do that same practice where they would deify, literally turn like successful generals into gods, where they would worship them. Now, Greek daily life is kind of circled around these religions, and offering sacrifices and libations constituted the usual method of communication for an ancient Greek trying to message their patron god. Today we might pray. Everybody has their own way. A lot of people don't have any spiritual beliefs today, but for the average Greek back then, they devoted a significant portion of their time towards worship. But they got to choose which gods they devoted their times towards. However, they weren't like begging from this god. They when they worshipped these gods, they were sacrificing things with the expectation that they would get something out of it. Like, it wasn't like, please. It was like, yo bro, you owe me something. # you owe me. So bulls, oxen, hens, and pigeons were commonly sacrificed. We know this because we found the burnt remains. However, the exact offer mattered little. Ancient Greek poet Hesiod once said, "Sacrifice to the immortal gods as your means allow." So they weren't classist, at least. People would also make votive offerings, which is, like I said earlier, if I have a good harvest, then I will donate this. 1/10 of the booty from war was culturally expected to be given as an offering, and this practice led to the massive enrichment of sanctuaries at Olympia and Delphi. Purification rites were also performed. And then here's a quote: They vainly purify themselves with blood when they are defiled with it, as though someone who has stepped into mud were to use mud to wash himself. That was Heraclitus, actually, who was not a fan of purification rituals. They also did divination, which is just like a fancy way of saying consulting the oracles. And this was actually a pretty big deal. It's the art of interpreting signs in daily things. And Xenophon mentions lucid dreaming as a sign from Zeus in his book Anabasis. And to decode divine messages, you could speak with a mantis or a seer. That's what that's like we call them oracles. They call them mantis or seer. Now, Again, even if this doesn't seem significant to us, the Greek armies of the day would bring seers along with them on campaign to help inform the generals. So their oracles could determine whether you went to battle that day or not. That seems pretty significant. So itinerant or migrant seers, like vagabonds, literally ancient hobos, would wander from town to town performing purification rituals, overseeing sacrificial ceremonies, and cursing jealous lovers. There were oracles all the way over at Cumae, Dodonda, Didymia, Claros, Olympia, and Delphi. And states consulted oracles before founding colonies, declaring war, making peace, or to get rid of drought. I mean, imagine if our political leaders today were consulting oracles. Herodotus reports the oracle's prophecies were often vague, leaving the interpretation up to the listener. And then examining ancient Greek religious power structures. So we'll go over this one pretty quick. Most people don't naturally think about the dynamics of power within any human social organization, but the web is weaved regardless of whether it's recognized. In Archaic Greece, there was not a central church. Economic or political elites dictated local religious customs. State officials fulfilled many religious purposes, just like in Rome, similar to the Pontifex Maximus. And they also controlled the sacred treasury, appointed religious positions, and officiated temple construction. Separation of church and state wouldn't enter Western thought until John Locke's popularization of the topic in the 17th century. So, all of these aspects of their daily lives were kind of controlled by these centralized authorities, it seems. And if we use Homer's Odyssey as a general guide, the prevailing attitude regarding the afterlife was much different in ancient Greek than it is today. They didn't spend their whole lives preparing for some kind of eternal afterlife. They worshiped their gods for what they could do for them in this world. Only exceptional men or women were expected to actually live an eternal afterlife on the Elysian fields. That's what their heaven was called, Elysian fields. And then only the absolute worst were thrown in Tartarus with Hades, which is like their version of hell. And generally, the soul was thought to kind of just stick around like a half-self and be like a ghost. Festivals were a huge part of Greek life. Like Dionysus, allegedly classical Athens held more sacrificial festivals than anywhere else. These involved hymns, dancing, staying up all night long, hashtag getting lit, right? Temples and religious festivals dominated the average Greek's life during this era. I mean, as long as you weren't a slave. And then Athenian tragedy, this led to an explosion of culture, drama. We've got like Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides. These people started to produce the first dramas. Now, these deserve their own videos, but in these dramas, they talk about political topics. Now, the standard view is that like it showcases freedom of expression in debates, but I got a feeling that if we actually read them, which I plan on it, we'll see that they may have been kind of like state propaganda, basically. And then Aristophanes, which is a famous Greek poet, in his book Clouds, devotes 60 lines comparing traditional to new think. Which is just literally like what it sounds like. He was comparing like the traditional way of thinking to this new way of thinking that he believed was taking over the Athenian youth. So, hashtag universal experiences, right? And then each of these wrote a number of works, and I will do a video on them, but what is remarkable is how the works portray social issues so openly, even if they are propaganda. So, moving forward, I've got some stuff on Eastern religion, Hinduism and Buddhism topics to discuss, but that'll be all we talk about today. And then the next time we talk about the Greeks, we'll be moving into the actual Persian Wars, now that we're like good and caught up on their culture. I'm at the Delaware Scenic River and Watershed, and this is just a small river, waterfall off the side. Just kind of meandering my way through on my way back down south for the winter. Anyways, this is Wandering Author here to remind you that we're all the authors of our own lives. As always, my message remains the same. Spend less, live more, earn your freedom with frugality. What are you guys doing in order to inspire, uplift, and empower your community today? Because this world isn't changing unless we all do our part. And you can count on me to do mine daily. Until next time, I love y'all.